Welcome to tape 063, which is a second tape on simplifying variable expressions. The two tools we're going to employ on this tape are the distributive property and the order of operations. Both of these should be familiar to you. When we get to their use, I'll review both of these rules. As you watch the tape, take careful notes, and on your notes mark any place that you don't understand or any exercise that I give you that you have trouble working correctly. Then ask a lab instructor or a tutor when you go to the lab. Now let's begin. On this tape we have two objectives. Objective 1 is to use the distributive property to simplify variable expressions. Use the distributive property to simplify variable expressions. Our second objective is to simplify general variable expressions by using the properties, by that I mean the number properties that we have studied, and the order of operations. Simplify general variable expressions by using the properties and the order of operations. Let's begin by reviewing the distributive property. Recall that the distributive property states that A times B plus C is equal to AB plus AC. A factor outside parentheses is multiplied by each term within the parentheses. A is multiplied by B, A is multiplied by C, and the results are added. Let's take a look at some examples using the distributive property. Our first example is 4 times the expression 3x plus 1. 4 times the expression 3x plus 1. Notice that we have a factor 4 outside parentheses, and inside the parentheses we have the two terms 3x and 1. 4 is multiplied by 3x, 4 is multiplied by 1. 4 times 3x plus 4 times 1. The result, 4 times 3x is 12x, 4 times 1 is 4, and so we get 12x plus 4. Most people in working a problem like this do not write in the middle line. Instead, they go directly from the problem to the final answer, because in your head you can multiply 4 times 3x to get 12x and 4 times 1 to get 4. If you feel comfortable leaving out the middle line, feel free to do so. If you feel more secure writing it in, then by all means continue to write it in for just as long as you'd like to. Let's take another example. This one is a bit more complicated. Example 2 is -5 times 3a subtract 2b add 6. The -5 factor must be multiplied by every term inside the parentheses. The distributive property applies to a factor multiplied by terms that are added, and so to make it easier to understand, let's rewrite the subtract 2b as add -2b. Then we can multiply -5 times the 3a, -5 times the -2b, and -5 times the 6. I've got the adding the opposite written in, so let's go directly to -5 times 3a plus -5 times -2b plus -5 times 6. -5 times 3a is -15a. -5 times -2b is positive 10b. -5 times 6 is positive 30. And so we write -15a plus 10b plus negative 30. If you'd like to leave your answer in this form, it is correct to do so. However, a mathematician would not write add a negative. Instead, the simpler version, subtract, would be used. And so the answer that is the best form is negative 15a plus 10b subtract 30. Notice that these terms cannot be combined because the variable parts are a for the first term, b for the second term, and the third term is simply a constant. We can only add terms if they are like terms, if their variable parts are identical. So this is as far as we can go with this problem. Our next example, a minus sign and then parentheses around 9x subtract 8y. Once again, inside the parentheses we have subtract, so we can rewrite that as add the opposite. The minus sign in front of parentheses is not a numerical coefficient, but there is an understood coefficient of 1 beside the minus sign. And so this problem is negative 1 times 9x plus negative 8y. We can multiply negative 1 times 9x and negative 1 times negative 8y. Negative 1 times 9x is negative 9x. Negative 1 times negative 8y is positive 8y, and there's our result. Now, this example can be thought of in a different way. When we have the minus sign preceding the parentheses, one way to handle the problem is to think of that minus sign as suggesting, implying that negative 1 is the coefficient. Negative 1 is the factor outside parentheses to be multiplied by the distributive property. There is an alternate way to look at this same thing, so let's look at it by recalling that a minus sign preceding an expression in parentheses means the opposite of the expression. Minus around an expression before an expression in parentheses means the opposite of the expression. So we can think of this expression as being the opposite of 9x subtract 8y. The opposite of 9x is negative 9x. Subtract will change to add negative. And the opposite of negative 8y is positive 8y. And so we get opposite of 9x to be negative 9x, opposite of negative 8y to be positive 8y. Now this gives us two ways of looking at the same problem. Let me put back up the first version we had of it, which is the opposite sign before 9x plus negative 8y is thought of as negative 1 times 9x plus negative 8y. The alternative version here is the minus sign before 9x minus 8y means the opposite of 9x plus negative 8y. Either use the negative 1 coefficient or use the opposite. Either way, our result is the same, negative 9x plus 8y.